Well, look, first of all, Nick Kingsbury, you're very welcome to the Y Factor interviews. So thank you for giving up your time.
No problem at all. It's my first time I've been interviewed by a cousin.
Yeah. Yes, we are related, aren't we? Yes, so Nick is my cousin. He is the youngest of three, and his mother is the sister of my late father. And an interesting fact, Nick's family were prolific builders. We've just been talking about that, actually. And used to employ, well, we're not quite sure about the number of people, but up to, say, 200 people in the village of Boxford in Suffolk in England, which is not far from where I am right now. Nick's an experienced international software entrepreneur and venture capitalist, and he set up his own software and consultancy company, which he sold after 12 years as CEO. He then spent 8 years at 3i as sector head for software and internet investments, and after that acted as an advisor to some venture capital funds and tech companies, including a board role with a quoted Australian software company called Objective Corporation. He joined Amadeus Capital Partners in 2018 and is a partner in the early stage team. Nick's focus is B2B software, computer vision, AI, and cybersecurity. Yes, well, so
Very
there's some
much in
stuff
the news these days.
very much in the news. And I hear you were in Milton Keynes the other day at the decoding, what's it called?
That's right, at Bletchley Park, because
Bletchley Park.
in fact, my father always said he was in the Royal Corps of Signals,
Yeah.
but it transpired that actually was not quite a cover, but it was he actually worked at Bletchley Park for some.
Did he?
Yes.
I didn't know that.
The story he told was that when he joined up, he joined a local regiment, and somewhere during training, the sergeant major asked, "Anyone here does crosswords?" And so he put his hand up, and he got transferred to Bletchley Park, where he was principally involved in intercepting German signals,
Really?
something called Y section. And he spent time at the Bletchley Park and possibly another place up in Leicestershire. And in fact, when the war ended, he wasn't demobbed like everybody else. He had to stay on for another 6 months, like many people who were at Bletchley Park, because at the time they thought there might be another war with Russia, and also to close down, partly for that reason, partly to close down Bletchley Park. And he used to have to go back every year, which he always said it was a sort of business conference, but it was to go back to Bletchley Park. So he kept the secret of his involvement to the grave, as they did.
Yeah, I guess they had to.
But if you go to Bletchley Park, there's now a brick on the wall, the Code Breakers wall.
Yeah.
There's Philip Bloss Kingsbury, which is my father.
Well,
And your
I
uncle.
did not know that. How
Yeah.
amazing. Well, I knew he loved doing his crosswords because,
Well, that's right. Yes, yes. And that led to I was saying to my sister came up to Bletchley Park, and it's saying to her that actually because he always said he was late for everything by a day. So he went over on D-Day +1.
yeah.
He arrived at Arnhem a day after, and there was a number of battles where basically he'd arrived just at the next day,
Right.
which is, he was always a kilometre back from the front line because he was intercepting signals. You don't want to be at the front line. So he was involved in it all, but not actually in the firing line.
Wow.
And all the while sending back reports back to Bletchley Park for decoding.
Well, I mean, that information was never shared with us. So there you go.
No. Well, it's been a process of discovery over the last few years. And I went up to Bletchley Park. When was it now? It was probably about 4 or 5 years ago for the first time, and kind of put the pieces together and talked again to my mother. And yes, it all came out. And in fact, at Bletchley Park, there's one of the signs says a lot of the people in who were involved in capturing signals said they were used as cover, the fact they were in the Royal Corps of Signals, but actually they were part of Bletchley Park, and they didn't want to say that because it's too confidential and they'd be shot as spies rather than just somebody with a radio helping communicate their own side's communication.
Because Anne's, she's trying to record. She's writing a book, isn't she, about the Kingsbury family?
Yes.
I can't wait to read that.
Yes, me neither.
Very good. Well, look, I'm going to start with some questions. So, look, tell us a bit more about your work and the highlights of your career so far. What have been the highlights for you?
Well, I think today my day job is spending time with early stage technology companies, typically with some brilliant invention at the heart of them. And by early stage, quite often it's sort of half a dozen people only. It might be up to the dizzy heights of 20 people in the company when we first get involved. So it's really trying to find super interesting businesses and technologies with a big market and a great team, and basically providing some capital and helping them hopefully to grow to be stellar successes. So that's today's job, but it's kind of, and there are threads back from what I've done over the years that sort of lead into that. From as you remarked, I set up my own business when I was young and foolish. I think it was 23 when I set the business up. But anyway, I guess running a business for a number of years, you get to understand all the ups and downs, and ultimately a lot of businesses resolve into selling and the trials and tribulations of sale processes. And so I think that experience, I'm sure, helps me empathize with the entrepreneurs I work with now. Things always take longer. The guy you've been dealing with for the last 18 months moves on to another role, and the whole process, your sales process, falls in a heap. And these sort of things are part of just what happens. And so I think having been through it helps with my perspective today, helping the companies we invest in.
Yeah, indeed. Very good. So who inspires you, dead or alive?
I think the sort of genesis of, I remember I kind of always had a sense that I wanted to set up my own business. And I think that comes back to my father. We started talking about him, and that he had a small building firm with quite correctly, the number varied, I think, from between 20 and over 100, or possibly even 200, depending on how much work there was. So that he had all those trials and tribulations of coping with the ups and downs, but still, I guess it was something deep in me that meant that when the stars aligned, I wanted to set up my own business. And I, through a series of one particular accident, I ended up in a career in IT as a software engineer, and we were doing some consultancy work for a client in Holland, in fact. Myself and a colleague and friend were on our way back from on the flight back on a Friday night, and been a tough week. So we're a couple of gin and tonics in on the airplane, and I said to my friend, I said, why don't we do this for ourselves? He sort of looked puzzled for a moment and said, yeah, we shouldn't we? And that was the Friday night. Over the weekend, we spoke to a third colleague who was an accountant who we worked with. I think we needed somebody like that, to mind the store, because both of us were out in the field type people. And literally on the Monday, the three of us resigned. So that,
wow, oh my goodness me.
And that was that. So that was the start of my entrepreneurship.
It wasn't too many gin and tonics, was it?
That's right. So never knock the power of a gin and tonic at the right moment.
No, indeed. So what do you think are the key ingredients for a successful entrepreneur?
I think that, there's the spark, which I had the spark that I'd kind of been waiting for the opportunity, whether I knew it consciously or not. I knew when it happened that was the opportunity I've been waiting for. So there's that spark. I think beyond that, there's then there's you get into the more mundane, not mundane, but the things people always talk about in terms of figuring out what you want to do and how you're going to go about it. And we, as you judged by the early part of the story, we didn't do an awful lot of business planning before we started.
You didn't have a business plan then?
No, we never did. To be fair, it was we started off as largely a consulting services business, so it was around body shopping, and in the first year, we were the bodies that were being shopped. So it was trying to find projects, contracting type projects, and the thing grew from there. I think after a year, we hired our first couple of people. Both of them are fabulous individuals, and then built the business from there. So I think in terms of your question, I think it's kind of, I was lucky because there was three of us, and I think left to my own devices, and this is where I look over my shoulder, and between you and I, Ian, I don't think we'd have succeeded. But the balance of the three of us,
the different skills,
the accountant who was the bucket of cold water onto my exuberant plans, and the third colleague who was on the airplane, who's a sort of quiet executor and great networker, a very, very bright guy. So I think the combination worked. Whereas I think if I was left to my own devices, I certainly at that age, I haven't got that spark at the moment. I'm too enjoying what I'm doing too much. But I think I've probably got the better skills now than I had then. I obviously, I say probably, definitely have, because you've been around the block so many times. You can see what can go wrong as well as go right. So I think it's, and also some of the best CEOs that I work with now, it's a combination of having that bold vision, but also being to execute in a scrappy, tactical way sometimes. And that's quite that's a bit of a split personality that you have to have. And I've got examples where it biases more towards the bold vision, and sometimes the scrappy, surviving at all costs piece is less focused, and it's been a bit of a bumpy ride. And other times there are entrepreneurs that are more around, I just need to pay the bills, and I'm not really taking my head up to look at where we're going and all of this. So I think it's that sort of split personality that that you really need to have a tremendously successful business.
Yeah, and an awful lot of determination and resilience.
Absolutely. Because inevitably, more times than not, things go wrong.
Yeah.
And it's figuring, getting used to that, and being able to cope emotionally with that is critical.
So what was your first job, and what did that teach you that still resonates today?
Well, my first job was a complete accident, in that, as you know, I did a degree in civil engineering. And in those days, when you were graduating, there was a book which contained basically job adverts from lots of employers. So that's how you got a job. So all the construction companies would have companies there. There'd be everything you can imagine. All the big companies, Marks and Spencers, would have all the jobs that for graduates. And it was a huge, big, fat book. And at the time, I'd got a project. My third year thesis was something called systems analysis investigation, and frankly, I was struggling badly. I knew what system meant, I knew what analysis meant, but I'd never seen the two words together. I was given the title for my thesis. Anyway, I was leafing through the book of jobs to try to find the construction jobs, and the page fell open, and the job title was systems analyst. And Hey, that's the second time I've seen those two words adjacent, or at least variants of the words adjacent. So I thought, well, in order to understand what those two words mean when they're together, I'll apply for the job. And so I applied for the job
And got it.
I got it, and they were paying, I think, about a third more than the construction jobs. It's also happened that I was based in Nottingham, and I kind of wanted to be in Nottingham, and one of the jobs that they had was in Nottingham, so that was that. So my construction career ended with that page, that book falling open at that particular page, and a career in IT started.
Who did you work for? What was the company?
It was a London-based software company called SPL International, who were one of,
Yeah.
I think, the big four systems integrators, sort of competing with Logica and SD and others. Have kind of slightly gone by the wayside now, but it was a prestigious, great firm to work for.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's anyway.
You
That's
were lucky.
how it all started.
So the other important ingredient is a bit of luck along the way, eh?
Well, that's right. That's right. And don't, if your book falls open on the wrong page,
Your
maybe,
stuff.
well, no, just have a look at the page it falls open on.
Yeah, don't if it says janitor, don't go for that job, for God's sake. So how do you stay sharp, motivated and curious?
There's an interest. I'll start with the end bit of that, in that you often hear about technologies or history, elements of history or whatever, or people's jobs, lawyers or tax accountants or whatever, and you think that doesn't sound interesting. But the more you look at it, if you do actually invest some time looking at whatever it is, the strange thing is it becomes more interesting the more time you spend on it. So and we're at an age at the moment where technology is changing so rapidly. It's a hackneyed thing to say, but it is. The age of AI is upon us, and material science and medicine, drug discovery, all these, cell and gene therapy. There's a whole range of areas that are accelerating incredibly fast. Quantum computing, and when you start looking, it's phenomenal what's going on. And so if you can get yourself into a position where you've got an open mind and you see something that maybe you think, oh goodness, that's off topic, or it's have I got the energy to look at this, or there's other things I'd rather be doing. But as soon as you actually start applying yourself, you find yourself getting consumed, and it's I'm in the glorious position where people send me every day. I get 2 or 3 brilliant ideas to look at, or say not all of them quite so brilliant, but and the more you look at them, the more you think, wow, that's super exciting. I was talking to somebody about a company just before this call, which was they're doing deep fake detection. It's a whole load of sophisticated software and AI being used to decide whether a picture, a video, an audio is genuine or not. And that's a real,
it's useful.
Hugely important in today's day and age. But it's not something where you'll ever solve it once and for all, because the bad guys will start to figure out how you detect their deep fake and change the technologies and what have you. So and that's a super interesting. Technically, it's really interesting. There's still a bit of a tech geek in me that says, oh, how are you doing that? But also in society, it's really, really important. We do need to be able to understand what's real and what isn't.
Does AI excite you, or does it frighten you, or a bit of both?
Both. I think there's an acceleration going on, and we those of us who've played around with ChatGPT and Claude and Gemini and what have you, we're dumbstruck by how brilliant they are. But what's also going on is the use of those technologies for coding, for writing software, and it's the recursive opportunity where you use the tool to enhance itself, where you get the super acceleration of AI, and that's kind of that's the why I think that if you think the pace has been quick to date, just watch. And I think people talk about AGI, and arguably we're there now, and that the AI can pass all the exams you could ever throw at it, and get top either percentile or certainly decile response scores, and possibly I think it's the coding one. It's top. One of the coding tests, it was the top 20 people in the world in terms of coding ability, and that's both very exciting and very scary. And I think it's then all the issues about guardrails and all that sort of thing. You start to really worry about that, which frankly, the genie is out of the bottle, and I don't think there's anything you can do about it, because it's happening in so many different places, and they're all there's nobody has a complete lead at the moment. They keep leapfrogging each other. So I think there'll be a number of different plays that'll have that sort of super acceleration phase, which is probably just starting to happen.
Do you think we might have a mass resistance to anything digital? We had the power outage in Spain, Portugal, and also affected Morocco. I've just come back from Morocco, where people will see these huge events take place. I think, goodness me, I can't trust everything being in a digital format. Therefore, can we rely upon AI to manage our services?
Yes, and I think there's a couple of sides to it. One is the cyber risk, and we've seen Marks and Spencer's hit, and other retailers, and there's a long list of other companies, large companies before them. So there's that element. So having your own records, I think, is important. And that doesn't mean to say you have to print it all out. You just need to make sure you've got records that are under your control. On the AI side, I think there will be, and I think it'll particularly, the big switch is autonomous vehicles, where that's more, it's very visible. Autonomy in factories has been happening for a couple of centuries. It's accelerating, but it's not so visible as autonomy in vehicles. And so all those driving jobs, all those taxi jobs, in a few years' time, will start to disappear. And the cost incentive is so great that that it will happen. And I think that's in my mind, that's when there's going to be a big trigger, and AI systems will be held to a much higher level than a human system. As we've seen already, if for every Tesla that catches fire, there's petrol cars are far more likely to go up in an inferno than an electric car. But as soon as it happens, everyone points at it, and so it's a facet of new technology. And I think, again, is it 1,000 people killed a day in the US or whatever it is on the roads? It may be even more. You get 5 people killed by autonomous vehicles, and that will be front page news. So I think there'll be a kickback, but I think the journey is inexorable, just because the economics are inexorable.
Indeed. So, okay, next question. What do you hope people who work with you say about your leadership when you're not about? Jolly nice bloke.
Yeah, that'll do. I think it doesn't screw up too often.
What do you think they actually say?
I don't know. I haven't got. What I think they actually say. I like to think that I'm very receptive to people, and I'm at a stage in my career where I'm not as competitive as I might have been career-wise earlier on, which means that I'm better placed to help people. And I think that's, there's a, sometimes, if there's a difficult topic, on email or something, it might I have a rule that you don't reply all, you reply to the individual. And that, if you do it enough, I think enhances your reputation, because you can make your point without
broadcasting.
Now, obviously, it's better to talk to people in person, but we're not. The time doesn't always allow that, and geography doesn't always allow that. So I think that's and also picking up the phone, or setting up, just picking up a Teams call rather than sending an email as well. And I hope that means that people think that I'm genuinely helpful and good to work with.
And can be trusted, yeah?
I guess there's two parts to it. There's one is my role within Amadeus, which I think those comments apply to. There's then the role I have as a board member on the companies that we're invested in, and separately with my Australian company, which is that's different in that sometimes one needs to be assertive, and sometimes one needs to wrestle with situations and the dynamics of those situations, including the people involved, to get the right outcome, which is slightly different to internally, because internally we're kind of we find our investment opportunities and we work on them, and so we're not day to day sort of working with each other quite in the same way as one does with the companies that we're invested in. I'd like to think, I think with the companies, our portfolio companies that we're invested in, I'd like to think that people say that Nick's really, really helpful. And I think also I was talking to one of my junior colleagues, because one of the companies that we're invested in was looking for another round. And I said, oh, so-and-so, can you get together a list of potential investors that we can, that might be relevant for our company? And so he got together a list and say, shall I just send this over to them? And I said, that's helping, but that's not really helping. And the really helping was finding out in those companies who we know, sending them a note saying, by the way, there's this stunning business we're invested in. You really, really ought to take a look. And copying in the CEO of the portfolio company. And that's really helping. And that led to meetings, and it led to in fact some new investors coming in, which was fantastic. And so I think it's kind of the really helping where you can't always deliver that sort of outcome. But I'd hope that that sort of sentiment would come back if you were to talk to the people I work with there.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. So what do you think your biggest achievements have been today?
There's the building up my own company is up there, and that's there's a point at which I remember going into work one day, and we wasn't a huge business. I think we were about 45 strong at the time, and we had a brief period where things were going well, and I was thinking, this is it. This is how good it could get. So I think that was really good. I think with Amadeus, there's individual elements of achievement. Making I've done 9 investments, and I've had one that's completely failed, and another one's a couple that are not doing brilliantly. But there's a couple that look as though they're really, really doing very well, and that's important to me personally. That's, I feel good about that. Obviously important to my firm, and so and that's, I suppose I'm getting the pleasure and reward I got when I set up my own company. I'm getting it vicariously through the work I'm doing with the companies we invest in, and that you've got a number. There's a number of half a dozen or so businesses at any one time, and hopefully at any one time, one or two of them are going well, and we invest in high growth businesses that have to be really, really ambitious, and they all have cash out dates. Generally it's a investor funded growth plan, and that's fantastic. You can, lots of fantastic businesses are built that way, but of course that always means you have a cash out date. So if you're lucky, it's in a year and a half's time. If you're less lucky, it's in a fortnight's time. There have been businesses that have been in the latter category, and that's incredibly stressful. Obviously, for the 10 times more stressful for the team than it is for me, but it's still stressful for me. But as I say, I think the satisfaction is when you pull through those situations and you sit there saying, one of my companies we invested in a year and a bit ago, and looks like we've got a round coming together. We originally invested, the round was about 4 million. It looks like we're going to be at 7 million, and that's at an increase in valuation, and that'll really help this business do what it needs to do, and that's very rewarding. And that when it comes together, and that's fantastic. And these. Obviously, I have a financial interest in these businesses through Amadeus, but it's more than that. It's more about seeing brilliant people that you like and respect, and enjoy working with, succeed and build out teams. And one of my companies that they started, when I met them, there were, I think, 14 people. They're now at 175 people. There's another one which when I met there were 8. And they're now at 20, a year later. And that's and these are great jobs in super interesting businesses. And the latter one, it's in the Midlands. This isn't in London. So I think it's seeing these businesses flourish. And as I say, they all have their ups and downs. Whether it's falling out with key people, or losing that big customer, or investor walks away at the last minute and causes a real problem, and so on. So there's always things go wrong, and you've got to kind of, as an entrepreneur, you've got to plan for everything going right, but not be too surprised when it. Drive for everything to go right, but don't be too surprised, and prepare yourself emotionally for things not going right.
What's your message to your younger self? So if you were, I don't know, in your early teens, and you could have a little chat with yourself, what would be your pearl of wisdom?
I think to pick up on something earlier, I think I'd say to my younger Nick, when you set up a business, for Christ's sake, to come up with a business plan. It really does help.
Bit of preparation.
I know you might be able to struggle through, but it really does help just to have some idea.
Have a forecast and a budget.
On the visionary to scrappy spectrum I described, we were on the scrappy end, and I think that we could have done with a bit more vision at the time. That came a bit later, but I'd say, I don't know. I think look at my own children. I think most of them are, well, they all are, confident individuals that I think will be successful in lots of different ways. And I don't think, not that they'd listen to me if I whispered words of wisdom to them, but I think to some extent, there's not much point. I think they will find their own way, and will succeed. There's things that you can do by example, just to subtle things that hopefully they pick up, which we all pick up from our parents in different ways. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'd say the other thing I'd say to my younger self is, just when you're wondering about picking up the phone to that girl, just pick up the bloody phone and ring her.
Nice bit of advice. I like that.
I remember days and weeks going by. Shall I ring her? Shall I ring her? I think that applies not only to teen relationships or teen potential relationships, but also I think in business life. I think just pick up the phone. I remember I worked with somebody. It's hilarious. We used to make it. He was a sales director of Staffware, who the company bought mine, and he was hilarious. He was hilarious, lovely guy. And he, when you talk to him about something, you said, maybe it's a product issue or a customer issue or something. And while you're talking, his hand would go to reach for the telephone, and before you'd finished, he'd be ringing the person you're talking about to talk to about the issue, whether it's, I don't know, the product's going to be late, and he'd be ringing the customer, tell them the product's going to be late, or it's whatever it is. And I thought, whilst we used to, I used to say, hang on a minute, Mike, just let me finish my sentence first. But the instinct, I think, is brilliant, and that is just pick up the phone, just do it, and you'll find out far more from picking up the phone than you will by sitting there sucking your pencil and looking out the window, even if it is a lovely view. As I'm in our Cambridge office, I'm looking over in the college. The Magdalen College is my view here at the moment.
Wow, yes, lovely. And tell us something extraordinary about yourself. Can you do that?
Well, to those people listening, I'd say hands up, everybody who's held a rhinoceros's penis.
Really? I don't know. I've not done that, actually.
I hasten to add the rhinoceros was unconscious at the time.
That's a good
tranquilized.
Okay.
It was a medical procedure that was some cream was being applied. But
where was that?
I was on a safari, and the guide had said, well, we need to find this rhino, and if we find this rhino, we need to apply some antibiotics or something or other. And
so you felt the need to touch.
Well, he said, can you come over here and hold this? So yeah. So funny
that's
thing
good.
is, I think I'm feeling probably like you now. I feel like I need to go and wash my hands at the moment.
I definitely see you in a new light, that's for sure. Fantastic. So my last question is, what book or movie or film has had the biggest impact on your life, and why?
I don't, I hard to pin anything on it. I don't read the sort of self-help business books and all that sort of stuff. I start every now and again. I'll start reading one, and by the time you got through the introduction, you think this is the same old bullshit. So that's never been a particular feature. I guess I read the Cicero trilogy by Robert Harris, which is a historical novel, series of novels, and that was sort of got me really interested in history, and so that's that. My side, my relaxation is listening to history podcasts and reading history books.
Okay.
So that's The Life of Ganges, one I'm reading, which is a Japanese author from the 11th century.
Okay.
It's a 1,000-page book, and it's a novel. So it's, apart from the Iliad and Odysseus, it's kind of but it's much more it's more like a modern day novel. It's all about gossips and gossips, court gossip, relationships, and this sort of thing. It's not, battles and supernatural chopping heads off Hydra and this sort of thing. It's anyway, that's what I'm reading at the moment.
Very good. Well, look, Nicky, thank you so much for sharing it's a part of your life with us. I've really enjoyed listening to you. Fascinating. I've learned lots of stuff. The rhinoceros bit particularly, that was an eye-opening moment.
Perhaps in the wrong sort of way, but the other influence is, of course, Emmy, who acts a bit like she's the sensible one, and when I've got harebrained schemes, she quietly reminds me of the practicalities, and as well as being a wonderful life partner, I say that you need a bit of yin and yang in your life, and that's she's certainly mine.
Yes, as is Hazel mine. She brings me back to earth, sometimes with a bump. Look, wonderful to see you. Thank you so much. That's wonderful.
Absolute pleasure. Great talking to you, Ian.